Now let's move on to a different title. It's a 10 out of 10 game, 10 out of 10 soundtrack. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
I thought it would be Donkey Kong Country Returns.
Which is also good and not a bad game.
That's good, but this is better.
But this is not only an improvement of everything that Donkey Kong Country Returns has done, but it is an improvement over everything the entire franchise has ever done.
Don't forget new funky mode.
Yeah, in the Switch version. But Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze released on the Wii U in 2014. Probably the best game on the Wii U, I would argue. But for me, this is probably the game soundtrack for the ages, Lex. I'm not joking. Instead of Donkey Kong Returns, it's David Wise Returns. The man who played a key role in many childhoods and apes alike. The whole soundtrack, which was released along with the game in 2014, is a true masterclass. The guy was cooking. He composed the entirety of this, and it shows. Very consistent throughout the whole thing. This whole track is groovy, rambunctious, flows smoothly with the gameplay, and jealously grabs your attention to hum along to. But also perfectly accompanies your journey with finesse as you experience one of the best 2D platformers ever made, along with one of the best soundtracks ever in tow.
Are we talking about Tropical Freeze?
We're talking about Tropical Freeze. Talking about Freeze. I'd suggest just listening to the track. I only have one track to recommend to you.
Is it Sticker Bush
Because everyone is really, really great.
Is it Sticker Bush Symphony?
Nope, it is Busted By You. This, just go and type in Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze soundtrack, Busted By You, and just go from there. And just enjoy the masterpiece that is this soundtrack. If there is any proof that there is a God out there, it's the fact that this man exists. I'm serious. Oh man, I love David Wise. He's so great. He has been in the industry for decades. They wanted him to do the soundtrack for this, follow up to Donkey Kong Returns that was on the Wii. This is a Wii U title. And gosh dang, it perfectly incorporates tunes from the old and combines them with the new, along with creating new classic tracks while honoring what came before. This album perfectly encapsulates, Lexi, the feeling of wonder and groove as you play as silly primates collecting bananas. Who would have thought?
Nice delivery there.
This game is awesome. It's not only an amazing 2D platform, probably the best, if not the best, one of the best 2D platformers ever created. Great game mechanics, executes them on it excellently, and it's fun, and it's entertaining, and has good pacing, and has great boss fights, and it's beautiful. Even on the Wii U, it was gorgeous.
Yeah, I remember seeing some guys play it when you would watch them, and I'd be like, "Hey, that looks nice."
And on top of everything, the cherry on top, the creme de la creme,
yes,
the frosting on the cake, and the presentation is the soundtrack, Lexi. It's so good. It's effective. It's awesome. It makes you feel alive. It's just everything you could want in any kind of soundtrack. It is probably, it's the one you want to listen to all the time outside of playing the game. It's so good. It's one of those soundtracks like Octopath Traveler, which I haven't played a whole lot of, but the soundtrack stands out so good.
It is very beautiful.
And it's so beautiful. Donkey Kong Country is in that same boat as Octopath Traveler. It is so good. It's amazing. So I don't know. Do you have anything to say about Tropical Freeze? And
I didn't play Tropical Freeze, but I was trying to think. I was thinking about whatchamacallit, the Sticker Bush Symphony, which is a really nice title from the original Donkey Kong Country, and then obviously Aquatic Ambience because it was trending last year online, mostly on TikTok. People would use it for oh, do you remember this from the 2000s and stuff? They would post pictures and stuff with that, and so now that track is forever ingrained in my head. But I was also thinking about how Smash Bros. Reorchestrated and redid some of the music. In the story mode for Smash Bros. Brawl, the Subspace Emissary, you're jumping on the river, you're Diddy Kong, and then you're Fox and Falco, and it's playing the dun 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 dun. And it's playing that beginning of, I think it's Sticker Bush Symphony. And I just remember, I didn't realize that was from Donkey Kong and stuff. And, Smash Bros. Did a good job in their, story modes and stuff like that, incorporating music from their franchises that I didn't realize as a kid were from the different franchises. So like I knew some songs were from Pokemon because we played a little bit of Pokemon, but like it made me recognize Star Fox like soundtrack. It made me recognize the Fire Emblem. Yeah, and like obviously it influenced me in like Mario and F-Zero because we didn't have a lot of F-Zero like influence. We had that one game on the Game Boy. But going back to Donkey Kong, like it's really fun to like see people who have never listened to certain video game music like Donkey Kong, or like some people were listening to like the Sonic music, or what was the one like it was certain music and people were like, this is really good. Like people, like musicians who have never played video games, they're like, this is really good music. Like it's really cool to see them break down stuff. Like one guy was reacting to Undertale's music to like the last fight, was it Asgore? And he's like, I don't know what is it with this song, but there's such a heaviness to it and there's such a sorrow. And that really reflects the mood of Asgore in the game when you fight him.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's really cool, like looking up like the professionals and how they're like noticing like all these details and stuff that like we've known, but like we didn't know how to pinpoint, or like we didn't notice until they pointed it out and stuff like that. It's really cool to see like musicians and just other people who have different experiences in life notice things and stuff we grew up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that with Tropical Freeze, it's, I mean, I can't emphasize it enough. It is a masterpiece. And the reason why is because you have David Wise, who did the original soundtrack for the original Donkey Kong Country. Mm-hmm. And so you have Donkey Kong Country. It was a take on a franchise that was just in the arcades and maybe on the NES. And you're like, oh, okay, whatever. And then you get Donkey Kong Country. It's like, oh, Rareware. This has so much style and substance and beautiful. And then you get the soundtrack. You're like, man, what is going on with the soundtrack? It goes incredibly hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you have people like Grant Kirkhope, who was part of the original crew as well.
Yeah.
And shout out to him and David Wise, who always work together on a lot of different projects. And something I love about Tropical Freeze is you have David Wise, who went and he did the original, right? That was 20 years. Flash forward 20 years later. He's later in his career. He's still in the industry. He's still working. He's still doing stuff. And then he gets a call and they say, hey, we want you to come do Tropical Freeze. And he goes and he does it. He gets paid, but he cooks, Lexi. And he makes something that is extremely memorable. And if you go to any track, I would say in the soundtrack, some of the main level themes, each one is just, it's just, each one has its own flair, but it's also excellently executed.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, that totally makes sense.
But I can't stress enough, like this Tropical Freeze is some of the best video game music ever out there. Like I don't know why it wasn't in my top 5. Like I was listening to it last night and I'm like, man, this is just, it's euphoric the way it makes you feel. It's really great. And it's from a game about apes collecting bananas, and fighting against cold penguins.
And like if you're looking at the original Donkey Kong, a giant alligator.
And one thing I forgot to even mention, well, I mentioned in my write-up here, but it takes everything that David Wise created, that he did, and he brings it back, but he incorporates it into new motifs and new songs that he created. And he integrates it and remixes it in, and it gives you that nostalgic feeling as well, which I don't really have a whole lot of nostalgia for the original Donkey Kong Country games. However, the way he incorporates it is so beautiful and it's so well done, where I'm like, dude, this is so cool, because he's like, literally, it's like this whole game, this whole soundtrack is like a love letter, not only to the franchise and to the fans and to everything about it, but it's to it's a love letter to his younger self, where he's like, yo, man, you did pretty good, but I'm gonna honor what came before, and it was himself. And I thought that was really cool, because I don't think there's a lot of examples of that, like in media and movies and TV, where the original creator comes back and he does just as good a job as he did back then. Yeah. And it's extremely rare. I mean, probably Mad Max, the films.
What about John Williams?
I mean, sure, John Williams and his
because the music
and his work for sure. But I would also say, like, maybe director wise, like George Miller, who did the Mad Max films, maybe he still has like an insane amount of talent and does it with just as much youthfulness as you would back in the day. Yeah. And I could hear the same thing in David Wise. Like, this guy is just awesome. And yeah, I guess John Williams, would be a good comparison. Like the guy still has it, and he's still willing to have fun while he does it.
Also,
and you could tell this whole soundtrack, they were having fun when they were making this.
Yeah. It seems like a really fun ride the game does, including the soundtrack. But
and you don't even have to be a fan of the game or play the game. Just
you don't really need to know the context.
You don't need to know the context. It's just good music.
It's kind of like Mario games where you really don't need to know context to play a random game. There's not really a sequel except for the Paper Mario games. But even then the games are pretty you can basically just take one off the shelf, a random one in any order and go, okay, I can play this. And you don't really need a lot of history of the backstory or anything like that with Donkey Kong and stuff like that. Cause it's usually just a collectathon. You get the bananas, fight the bad guys.
Get the coins.
Yeah, you get the coins.
Get to the end of the level.
Get the K-O-N-G.
K-O-N-G. Oh, the Kong letters. Yeah, Kong letters. So, I think we should move on, but
I have some
video game music, Tropical Freeze, man, just fantastic. Really great. Shout out to David Wise. He also is still working. He's doing a new game. I forgot to write it down, but it's a new 3D platformer that's coming out sometime later on. It's like a mix between I'm just going to look it up real quick, but Lexi, what did you want to bring up?
Well, since we're on the topic of Donkey Kong and that kind of game, I think we need to bring up the arguably best video game.
Before you do, I think I found the soundtrack. It's called Nico. Oh man, how do I say this? Nico Dorico: The Magical World. It's a 3D platformer that's basically, imagine Crash Bandicoot and Donkey Kong Country mixed together. That's basically what this game is.
Oh.
And he wrote the soundtrack for it. He also did a bunch of others, like the new Battletoads game that came out, Snake Pass, which is awesome.
He did Snake Pass. That was a really good soundtrack.
He assisted also with Ukulele as well, both of the games.
Okay, yeah, I remember seeing his name on the CD.
So how do you say it? Nico Dorico: The Magical World. Go look that game up. I wishlisted on Steam. Looks really fun.
Okay.